What would you do if you woke up to find strangers trying to sell the one place you've ever called home? Eleanor Grayson's eyes fluttered open to the sterile hum of a hospital room. The rhythmic beep of machines was her only company, save for the dull ache in her chest where surgeons had battled to save her life. A heart attack, they said. 3 weeks in a coma. Tubes snaking from her arms. Her world reduced to a haze of white walls and antiseptic. At 52, Eleanor had lived quietly in her modest home on Maple Street, a place she'd poured her soul into since her husband, Thomas, passed a decade ago. That house wasn't just walls and a roof, it was her anchor, her memory of love, her defiance against a world that often felt too heavy. But as she lay there, weak and disoriented, she had no idea her sanctuary was under siege. The first hint came from a nurse, a kind woman named Clara, who mentioned a visitor. Some real estate guy stopped by yesterday, Clara said, adjusting Eleanor's fore. Said he was checking on your condition for a property deal. I told him you weren't awake yet. Eleanor's brow furrowed. Property deal? Her house wasn't for sale. She'd never spoken to anyone about selling. The unease settled like a stone in her gut, but she was too weak to act, her voice barely a whisper. All she could do was cling to the thought of her home, her garden of roses, the creaky porch swing, the kitchen where she and Thomas had danced to old records. Days later, when Eleanor could finally sit up, she demanded her phone. Her neighbor, Mrs. Delgado, answered on the second ring. Eleanor, thank God you're awake, the older woman said, her voice trembling. There's a for sale sign in your yard. Some company's been showing people around, saying you approved it. I tried to stop them, but they had papers. Eleanor's heart pounded, the monitor beside her spiking. Papers? She owned her house outright, the deed secured in a lockbox under her bed. No one could sell it without her signature. Could they? The truth unraveled in fragments. A real estate firm, Pinnacle Properties, had listed her home, claiming they had power of attorney. They'd produced documents forged. Eleanor was sure, stating she'd authorized the sale while incapacitated. The audacity burned in her chest. She'd been fighting for her life, and someone saw her vulnerability as an opportunity. But who? And how did they know she was in the hospital, unable to fight back? Eleanor's recovery became a race. Every physical therapy session, every painful step, was fueled by the need to reclaim what was hers. She called her lawyer, a gruff old man named Harold who'd known her since she was a girl. This stinks of fraud, Harold growled over the phone. But we need proof, and we need it fast. They're moving to close the sale next week. Eleanor's mind spun. She didn't have the strength to leave the hospital yet, but she couldn't let her home slip away. She needed an ally, someone who could dig where she couldn't. That's when the first twist came. Clara, the nurse, overheard Eleanor's desperate call to Harold. After her shift, she lingered by Eleanor's bedside. I shouldn't get involved, Clara said, her voice low, but I heard something odd. The guy who came by, he wasn't just some realtor. He mentioned a name, Vincent Cole. I know that name. He's bad news, Eleanor. Runs a shady operation in town, preys on people who can't fight back. Clara's eyes held a flicker of guilt, like she was admitting something she'd buried. My brother got mixed up with him once. Lost everything. If you're going after Vincent, I can help. Eleanor was stunned. Clara, this quiet nurse who'd been nothing but professional, had a stake in this fight? It was a lifeline she hadn't expected. Clara offered to visit Eleanor's house, to snoop around and gather evidence. Eleanor hesitated. Trust didn't come easily, but the thought of losing her home outweighed her doubts. She gave Clara the key to her lockbox, praying she wasn't making a mistake. Clara returned the next day, her face pale. They've been inside your house, Eleanor. The lockbox was open, but the deed's still there. They left papers, fake contracts, emails. They're good, but not perfect. I took photos. She handed Eleanor a stack of printed images, showing documents with her forged signature. One name stood out. Vincent Cole, CEO of Pinnacle Properties. Clara's intel was gold, but it raised more questions. Why target Eleanor? Her house was modest, not a mansion. What made it worth this elaborate scheme? The second twist came when Harold called with news. I did some digging, he said. Your property's sitting on land flagged for a new commercial development. Big money, millions. The city's been quiet about it, but Pinnacle's got connections. They want your lot, Eleanor, and they're not above stealing it. The revelation hit like a thunderbolt. Her home, Her sanctuary was just a pawn in a corporate game. But they didn't know Eleanor. She wasn't just a sick woman in a hospital bed. She was a fighter, forged by years of loss and resilience. With Clara's evidence and Harold's legal maneuvering, Eleanor built her case. She couldn't leave the hospital yet, but she could strategize. Clara became her eyes and ears, sneaking into a Pinnacle open house at Eleanor's home, posing as a buyer. She recorded Vincent himself, boasting about clearing out the old lady's junk to make way for progress. His arrogance was his undoing. Clara caught him admitting the forged power of attorney was a necessary shortcut. That recording was dynamite. But the fight wasn't over. Vincent's team pushed harder, sensing resistance. One night, a man in a suit visited Eleanor's hospital room. He was polished, charming, and carried a briefcase. "Ms. Grayson," he said, smiling like a wolf, "we can make this easy. Sign the sale papers, and you'll walk away with enough to start over. Fight us, and you'll regret it." Eleanor's hands shook, but she stared him down. "Get out," she said, her voice steady despite her fear. "You don't know who you're dealing with." The man left, but his threat lingered. Eleanor knew time was running out. Harold filed an emergency injunction to halt the sale, using Clara's recording and the forged documents as evidence. The court moved fast, freezing Pinnacle's actions. Vincent's empire began to crack. Local news caught wind of the story, and soon, other victims of Pinnacle's schemes came forward. A widow whose farm was targeted. A veteran whose apartment was nearly sold out from under him. Eleanor's fight wasn't just for her, it was for them. On the day she was discharged, Eleanor walked out of the hospital, frail but unbroken. Clara drove her to Maple Street, where the for sale sign was gone, ripped from the ground. Eleanor stood on her porch, the deed clutched in her hand. She'd won, but the victory was bittersweet. Her home was safe, but the violation lingered, the idea that someone could try to steal her life while she fought to survive. As she stepped inside, the familiar creak of the floorboards welcomed her. She thought of Thomas, of the roses she'd plant come spring, of the community that had rallied behind her. Clara, now a friend, not just a nurse. Harold, her steadfast ally. Even Mrs. Delgado, who'd kept watch over her home. They reminded her of what mattered, not just the house, but the people who made it a home. Eleanor sat on her porch swing, the evening air cool against her skin. She'd faced down greed and won, not because she was strong, but because she was stubborn, surrounded by those who cared. The world could try to take what was hers, but it would never take her spirit. Indy.